Pleiadian Workbook by Amora Kuan Yin, published in 1995. Prologue. Have you ever looked back over your life and realized that everything you experienced was leading you to something? That this process called life is not just a random series of events, but follows an intelligent divine order? The Pleiadian light work has been such an unfolding for me. As a child, I saw fairies and miniature spaceships made of blue light in the flowers and bushes. When I closed my eyes in a darkened room, I saw swirling mandalas of multiple bright colors, images, and scenes. Upon awaking or falling into sleep, past life movies played before me. I did not have names for all of these experiences then, but they were an important part of me, a part I knew I could share with no one. Throughout the years, occasional psychic phenomena, which I prefer to call full sensory perception phenomena, haunted my otherwise so-called ordinary days and nights. I simply learned to live with them. However, by the late 1970s and my Saturn return, the experiences had become more and more frequent, as well as emotionally unnerving. I considered myself an atheist by then, disillusioned with organized religion, but I knew past lives were real because of my lucid reoccurring experiences. In my very first past life healing session with a hypnotist and regressionist, much to my chagrin, I found myself on a mountainside meadow with thousands of others as Yeshua delivered a sermon. I had told Mr. Brown, the therapist, quote, "I'm here to heal my past lives so I can get on with this one. But don't you try to convince me of any religious crap because I'm an atheist. I just want these past life memories to stop invading my life." End quote. I have often wondered how I might respond to a client who came to a first session with such an arrogant, non-spiritual attitude. Hopefully I would have had the patience and tolerance Mr. Brown did, as he simply replied, "That's fine," and began the session. In my Sermon on the Mount regression experience, as Yeshua spoke, there suddenly appeared a giant spaceship made of stellar blue light just above the woods to his right. Then another spaceship appeared, and another, until 6 of the huge craft had come and gone. All around me, people fell to the ground, covering their heads and whimpering. But I stood, hands above my head in ecstasy, silently repeating, "Home, home," and weeping tears of joy. With a tug on my garment, my then husband cried, "Samantha, get down!" I stood transfixed, unable to move, until I felt a magnetic pull at my third eye and found myself eye to eye with Yeshua. My third eye was lasered with a beam of the most intense light I had ever seen, followed by a cellular flood of light and energy. I burst into tears of spiritual awakening and joy. I had experienced a cellular awakening, my soul's remembrance of itself, and enlightenment all at once. The scene replayed itself from beginning to end, complete with all the sensations and knowing, and then ended. Immediately, I re-experienced myself as pure consciousness in the form of a blue ball of light, falling through space to Earth from a large blue star. This was the beginning of my spiritual awakening in this lifetime. At that time, I had no reference points as to the meaning of enlightenment. I had never heard of spaceships having any connection with spiritual or religious phenomena. I had never even heard of auras or oversouls or Shaktiput, all of which I had experienced vividly during the regression. I opened my eyes after the session and saw a clear green light around Mr. Brown's body. I remarked to him, "Mr. Brown, your aura is so green tonight. What does a green aura mean? In fact, what is an aura?" He looked at me rather suspiciously as he replied, "You obviously know what an aura is. You just talked about mine." I assured him that the words had come from my mouth, but that I had no conscious knowledge of what I was talking about. I was seeing auras for the first time in this life, yet I had no understanding of what they were. Mr. Brown gave me a very basic definition of an aura, saying it was a person's energy field around his or her body. It was years before I understood the connections between the Christos, Sirius, the star system, enlightenment, and the spaceships of light. I learned that the extraterrestrial light beings who taught and healed me while I slept were from the Pleiades, and that their work was to help bring about the second coming of Christ en masse, when many of us here on earth become actualized, Christed beings. I also came to know that spaceships from Sirius appear as blue light vessels, and that the Christ teachings for this galaxy originated on Sirius and are held there and impulsed to Earth. All of these puzzle pieces put together have led to the Pleiadian light work that I do, taught to me by the Pleiadian emissaries of light and the ascended master who was Yeshua ben Joseph when last embodied. Pleiadian light work has several facets, including hands-on energy work, clairvoyant reading, dolphin brain repatterning, dolphin star linking, and higher self-alignment. The main purpose of Pleiadian light work is to open and activate your Ka channels, which pull high-frequency energy and light from your multidimensional holographic self to your physical body. This activation opens the necessary pathways in your body for your master presence or Christed self to come in, as well as making the possibility of ascension versus physical death. This alignment of your divine self and your physical body raises your vibratory rate, energizes your acupuncture meridians for physical balance and rejuvenation, accelerates your spiritual evolution, activates your electrical light body, increases the flow of cerebral spinal fluid throughout your central nervous system, clears neural pathways, and stimulates emotional healing. Much of this healing and spiritual transformation work can be done without a human practitioner. If you know how to call on the Pleiadian emissaries of light healing teams, what to ask for, and appropriate self-care methods for assisting in your own process, sessions can be set up in your own home, alone. That is why I have been guided to write this book, to enable you to receive guidance, healing, and spiritual assistance from the Pleiadian emissaries of light as it is appropriate for you. The Pleiadians have told me that the knowledge and healing practices of the divine Ka, which are the heart of Pleiadian light work, were key ingredients of ancient Lemurian, Atlantean, and Egyptian healing temple practices. Once, while I was talking to a woman on the telephone about the Pleiadian lightwork intensives that I teach, I had a vision of the two of us, along with several other women dressed in white priestess robes, standing in a circle in an ancient Egyptian temple. Some of the women were crying, and all were very sad. We had just learned that soldiers were on their way to destroy the temples and take us prisoner. The political and spiritual hierarchies had been defeated, and the temples of Set, a fear-based, dark religious order, were to replace the sacred light goddess temples. As a group, we decided to burn the temple's belongings and all of us to take poison. A gentle suicide seemed a much better destiny than the rape, violence, and oppression that was our other option. I said to the women, "When the cycle of darkness has ended, we will return and reawaken the memories of our temple teachings." One of the younger women said through her sobs, "But how can it be? Everything we've loved and worked so hard for will be lost." I replied, "Dear one, if I dreamed it before and brought it to our people, then I will do it again when the time is right." Several lifetimes before that one, I had been a priestess with the gift of dreaming. I had worked multidimensionally through lucid dream time, doing healing and spiritual teaching, while bringing through teachings from the Pleiadian emissaries of light to the temples. In the Egyptian temples that were about to be destroyed, I had begun a new avenue of healing. It was basically the Pleiadian light work that now has been reintroduced in this lifetime. And so my promise has been kept. Because of Earth's position in her evolutionary cycle, the Pleiadian emissaries of light have said to me, "It's time now for this work to be remembered." The process of writing this book has been an amazing life experience in and of itself. I deliberately decided, once I was asked to do the book by the Pleiadians, not to read any other remotely related materials until the manuscript was completed. So any similarities of information are totally coincidental, except for a few cross-references to Barbara Hand-Clow's newest book that were added afterward. I had no idea prior to sending in the book proposal and partial manuscript to Bear & Company that Barbara Hand-Clow and her husband own this publishing house. Since reading several of her books, Heart of the Christos, Liquid Light of Sex, and Chiron, Rainbow Bridge Between the Inner and Outer Planets, and hearing her speak in Seattle a few years before, I had held her in deepest respect and considered her to be a very clear person of high integrity. To have the opportunity to work with her directly was like icing on the cake. So when I came home one evening to find a message from Barbara on my answering machine saying Bear wanted to publish my book, I was doubly ecstatic. When the Pleiadian emissaries of light had first told me about writing the book, they had shown me the back cover with Bear & Company's name on it. 5 days after receiving Barbara's message, before reaching her by phone, I received a letter from her that began, "Are you as excited about this as I am?" I could not help but laugh and feel honored at the same time as I went on to read that she had a new book coming out in the fall called The Pleiadian Agenda, a new cosmology for the age of light, to which my book was the perfect companion. Her book included information about the Ka, and about the pressing need for healing and activating it. But the Pleiadians had told her that someone else would be channeling and writing the workbook on how to do so. Barbara and I were completing each other's vision and information without any conscious direct collaboration. We agreed that we would not see each other's manuscripts until both were complete, so that we would not be influenced by each other. And yet even in our phone conversations, it was obvious that we were working with exactly the same Pleiadian source. The natural complementary nature of the two works is simply a direct product of Pleiadian ingenuity. After completing my manuscript and reading parts of Barbara's new book, I added a couple of references from the Pleiadian agenda into my text and glossary. Just prior to completion of this book, after my morning meditation, I was guided to the living room to pick up another of Barbara's books, Signet of Atlantis. I had recently purchased it to read after my book was complete, but was told that morning to open it and read the preface. It contained Barbara's story of how her trilogy, of which Signet was the third book, had all come about. All the delays, the distractions, the time constraints, and so on were outlined. Her story was so similar to mine that I thought, maybe this is just how the Pleiadians do things. I wish I'd known before. Then I might have been less anxious about getting it done on time. During the 6 months of writing this book, I went through separation and finally divorce from my recent marriage. I kept up my full-time teaching and private healing practice, and I was ill, very ill, for 2.5 weeks. I moved houses, and I taught a 21-day Pleiadian lightwork intensive. Prior to that time, I had seldom worked more than 3 days in a row without a day or two off. But for those 6 months, that schedule seemed like an ancient dream. However, I gained a new level of confidence in my ability to keep going in an effective and consistent way. 8 weeks prior to the completion of this book, near the end of my morning meditation time, the Pleiadians came in and took me through several new energy and frequency experiences. Afterward, they asked me to go to the computer and open a new file. I did so, and they proceeded to give me a rough outline for the next book on Pleiadian lightwork. I guess my new lesson is that the river continues to flow without ceasing or hesitation. Partly, this continuing rapid flow is accelerated by the fact that Earth is in the photon band and will continue to move deeper into it without going retrograde. As the year 2013 approaches, there will be no major let-ups in the intensity and acceleration. The shifts have begun, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and mentally, and will only get bigger and more obvious as humanity moves through time and space over the next 17 years. You may feel called to learn healing modalities, take spiritual trainings, see healers for assistance, or seek out sacred ceremonial experiences. You have your own individual role in the upcoming times, and your urges need to be examined and followed through on when they feel divinely inspired and are not just reactionary fears about being left out. Many people will just be beginning to awaken to the concept of spiritual evolution during this upcoming times, while others will choose to leave the planet or resist change to the last breath. If you have a role during these accelerated days as a healer, a teacher, a counselor, or a knowledgeable friend, do not hesitate to prepare yourself to fill that role. The Pleiadians and my hope and intent are that this book will contribute to the grace and deepening of your healing, clearing, and spiritual evolution, as well as that of the planet. With unity of purpose, we shall individually and collectively give birth to a new way of being and living, and the goal of planetary ascension will be achieved. Section 1. Why the Pleiadians? Why now? Chapter 1. In the beginning. As I lay on the floor at the end of 3 days of Feldenkrais guided floor movement work, a human-sized light being named Pa-La held out his hand for me to take. The trust and familiarity were immediate, and as I let go and reached for his hand, I bilocated beside my own body. Holding Pa-La's hand all the while, I floated with him out of the room, above the house, and quickly beyond Earth's atmosphere, moving effortlessly through and beyond layers of murkiness, followed by areas of soft, radiant blue and milky white. We broke through into open space. The vision of a vast and beautiful multicolored nebula of mostly red, with splotches of blue and smaller amounts of yellow and white, was the only thing that interrupted the seemingly endless skyscape of deep blue-black expansiveness, dotted holographically with stars. Today, the exquisite memory of passing beneath the nebula is as vivid in my mind's eye as if I were still there watching. Just beyond the nebula, we seem to slow down and approach a structure made of dozens of bright gold pyramids with equilateral golden crosses on top. It was the roof of a space station, which, as we lowered to approach it from beneath the pyramids, proved to be quite large. From inside the warehouse-sized building, the pyramids were about 40 feet above us, and hollow, yet emanating clear colors of light from an unknown power source. The room itself was mostly white, very sterile in appearance, and also lit from an unapparent source. I was so taken by the beauty of the pyramids and the incredible blend of love and intelligence flowing from the 4 light beings who greeted us that I noticed nothing else about the place. These beings were each a solid color: red, golden yellow, green, and blue. They appeared to be about half again my height, and were shaped like elongated triangles that were rounded on top. They had no obvious limbs or faces, and yet the tops of the tall triangular-shaped bodies seemed to contain semblances of eyes and communication centers, as if the beings were hooded, robed figures with bodies inside. Pa-La, on the other hand, was humanoid in shape and completely made of sparkling bluish-silver light. The golden being at some point telepathically asked if I would like to receive an energy balancing. Contrary to my usual cautious nature, I answered yes with no questions asked. The smaller silver-white being who had guided me there lifted me to the ceiling and deposited me on one of the pyramids with my head in the very top. I was surrounded and filled with sparkling yet clear colored light and energy until I felt overwhelming joy and lightness of being. Then the golden being asked telepathically if I was ready to have my Pleiadian astral body back. Without hesitation, and with tears of great love and relief, I replied, "Oh, yes." Energy and color began to accumulate and swirl rapidly. Somehow, this was an interplay between my body and the energy field inside the pyramid. A light body, exactly like that of the tall triangular beings, red in color, was formed. It attached into my body with a silver cord, like the one to my human astral body, and I could feel my consciousness simultaneously in the new form and my human one. This light body blended in and around my human body. My energy surged, and my joy and relief birthed a deep sense of peace and rightness of being. It was not another entity that was attaching itself and blending with me. It was a part of my own wholeness that was being given a light form and was returning to me, a part that I had left behind a long time ago. A deep bond of friendship, trust, and ancient love welled up inside me for these old, refound comrades. I knew that when I had originally come to this galaxy, the Pleiadian form had been the first one I had taken to downstep my vibration in preparation for services here. I had dwelled in varying locations in the Seven Sisters solar system, receiving instructions and experience pertinent to my future purpose. So, being with these cherished and ancient friends was natural and felt long awaited. When the tour and light body connections were complete, we parted with a silent exchange of mutual love, gratitude, and respect. The return flight was very quick compared to the journey there. I have done many journeys since that time, and they have always been faster. When I am blended with my Pleiadian light body, time and space restrictions are minimalized. While hovering above the room, before I returned to the floor with the other students, I was told that my Pleiadian light body would be away from me most of the time, but would maintain a constant connection with the Pleiadian emissaries of light, which is the name I later learned to call my friends. My Pleiadian light body would enable me to serve in two places at once, and to be an intermediary between the higher dimensions and third-dimensional Earth, as well as between the Pleiadian central sun, Alcyone, and Earth. The Pleiadians told me they were closely studying the neuromuscular cortical repatterning training, in which I was participating, because they were learning how to assist human beings in making the vibrational shifts necessary for our nervous systems to withstand the coming frequency changes on Earth. The key was in learning as many ways to heal the nervous system as possible. For the purpose of studying and assisting us in deepening our healing experiences, one Pleiadian guide would be assigned to each person in the training who was willing. These guides would monitor us, study the effects of the work, and determine ways of utilizing the information to assist others as well. This would be done in upcoming times with many people while they slept on the higher astral planes. In addition, many people would receive work directly from human practitioners such as myself. I would be given healings and realignment work during my sleep in order to deepen my own benefits from the neuromuscular cortical repatterning training, as well as participate in experiments on how to etherically work on others most effectively. The Pleiadian emissaries of light would also teach me advanced techniques during sleep. While in the third dimensional class, learning on the teacher's level, I would simultaneously be instructed telepathically on ways of improving the work as these Pleiadians deemed appropriate. With these last preparations, my Pleiadian guide, Paala, brought me back into my body. I had virtually no sense of travel time by Earth standards of measurement as I awoke back in the room. That night was the first astral class in which I consciously participated. When I awoke the next morning, my body was moving involuntarily. Immediately, the telepathic message from Paala was, relax and allow the body to complete the movement pattern, and then write it down. As I did so, my body performed a series of elegant yet subtle moves. When I wrote them down sequentially, they became what I entitled the cradle. This type of guided movement work as a whole is called dolphin moves and is part of dolphin brain repatterning. Its roots are in the principles of Moshe Feldenkrais's awareness through movement exercises. The Pleiadian version of guided movement work is the next evolutionary step for that modality. In fact, that same night of my first astral class, I was with Moshe Feldenkrais and several others in a laboratory setting. Computers were there with the capability of monitoring psychic or non-physical input. Moshe, whom I had never met in the physical world, was explaining and demonstrating the work he had developed in his physical life and how it could be expanded and improved with the willing assistance of people like me. Moshe's body had died a few years before, but his genius and commitment were alive and well, so to speak. I met with Moshe and the Pleiadian emissaries of light together many times on the astral planes. The time spent with Moshe and the group were wonderful. Moshe tended to be straightforward and to the point, offering little unnecessary communication. An occasional heartwarming comment or joke was rare and precious. Sometimes I was given dolphin movements. Sometimes the group taught me the philosophy and theory behind the work. Sometimes laser technology for healing was included, or hands-on sessions, which are the other aspects of dolphin brain repatterning. I always wrote down what I remembered in the mornings. For an entire month, I kept 2 journals, one for the Pleiadian work and the other for the neuromuscular cortical repatterning training intensive I was taking. A few times during the intensive, I spent time on Pleiadian light ships or at other space stations. These occurrences took place both in my astral body while I was lucid dreaming and while I was awake during class or meditating. Without exception, the experiences were loving, respectful of my boundaries, and honoring of my free will. To this day, I have never had a psychic cord or implanted device of any kind placed in me by the Pleiadians, nor have I witnessed these occurring in others. I have personally had problems in the past with extreme invasion by other not-so-ethical extraterrestrials, and have depossessed many clients from these extraterrestrials and their implants. After the intensive, I spent a couple of days in Anaheim, California, to go to Disneyland with friends from the training. The first afternoon there, I was lounging by the motel pool with mellow music playing on my Walkman when my Pleiadian guide came and asked me to go with him again. As I lifted out of my body, I was startled and immediately on guard at the sight of 2 other beings whom I recognized as being from Orion. My guide quickly reassured me that they were okay, which I soon sensed was true, for I felt compassion from these Orion beings. A silent communication from them let me feel and know their regret that some of their kind had gone awry. They also let me know that they were serving the light, and the Galactic Federation of Light specifically. The four of us moved quickly together to a large space station just inside Earth's atmosphere. It was huge, many stories high, with each floor appearing to have a complete function of its own. However, I was not in any one place long enough to examine it until we arrived at our destination. There, in the center of an approximately 20 by 20 foot room, was a dark cobalt gray cylinder made of what appeared to be a strange metal. I can describe it no further at this time. This particular group of light beings from Orion told me that they have the ability to reverse nuclear waste and nuclear energy out of existence with the use of this chamber, which they created. In fact, they assured me that no residue will exist anywhere when this device is used. They went on to explain that they will never use it unless enough humans awaken to the recognition of the darkness that has permeated this planet and choose to take responsibility for co-creation here according to divine law. As Earth's people, we must become aware of our impact on the planet and on each other and future generations. We human beings must ask for divine intervention to remove the threat of nuclear annihilation from the planet. Without this threat, we will have a chance to start over as co-creators with one another, with the God and Goddess and all that is, with Gaia herself and all life forms on Earth, and our intergalactic friends. Since that time, Saint Germain further explained to me that we must all take responsibility for working within what he calls the harmonics of co-creation. With co-creation, win-win is the attitude employed, as well as the result of all action and creation of reality. Needless to say, I was very grateful when I returned to my body that day in Anaheim, and a bit humbled by the meeting with the Orion beings, whom I had previously presumed to be all bad. They had so impressed me with their sincere dedication to Earth and to the light that ever since that meeting, I have attempted to remove all such negative and judgmental labels from my attitudes and vocabulary. My intent is simply to see everything from a standpoint of evolutionary development levels. All of existence is an ongoing process of learning and evolving. Along the way, we may get caught up in power trips or black magic, drugs, or abuse of various kinds. But eventually, all life forms evolve into being co-creators with the God, Goddess, all that is, in harmony with the divine plan of light, love, and truth. We will all naturally care deeply for all of creation. To judge anything or anyone for its present level in that evolutionary process is both counterproductive and a complete mistake. We are responsible for teaching by example, first and always, as we grow and become more conscious. It certainly helps us to feel and honor the connectedness of all things by choosing to see life that way. After that trip with my 3 escorts, all of my Pleiadian friends seemed to vanish into thin air. I called on them. I established dream intense for rendezvous times, but nothing happened. Daily I became more and more frustrated and lonely until one afternoon, while meditating, I began sobbing loudly, crying out, "Why have you deserted me? Where are you? Have I done something wrong?" I felt a warm glow of the familiar loving presence I had come to know as Ra, the golden being, touching my arm. Again I asked, "Why did you disappear? I've missed you. You've made my life so much more meaningful, and I just can't bear it if you go away." Very compassionately, Ra replied, "Beloved, we will never be far from you, and if you really need us, we'll always make our presence known to you. But for now, you must get on with your life here on Earth. When we are in contact with you regularly, you tend to make us more important and more real than the rest of your life. And we would never do anything to usurp your learning and growth and service here on Earth. We love and respect you too much for that. When the time is right, we'll be together again in your conscious awareness as well as in the unconscious realms." Sending a last wave of love and compassion that flowed through me and helped me relax, Ra left. After that, with the exception of a small number of channeling sessions, most of my conscious contacts with Ra and the others happened during sessions with clients. In these sessions, the Pleiadian emissaries of light sometimes instructed and assisted me in the healing process. This was almost exclusively during dolphin brain repatterning and dolphin move sessions until the late summer of 1993, when the next phase began. Chapter 2: My Introduction to Pleiadian Lightwork. August of 1993 found me taking a much-needed rest at the Breitenbush Hot Springs, a resort in Central Oregon. Surrounded by old-growth forests and the sounds of the rushing Breitenbush River, I sat at a wooden picnic bench on an outside deck, leisurely having an organic vegetarian meal prepared by the incredible kitchen staff. I had been at the resort for 6 days and had managed to do enough hot mineral soaks, saunas, cold plunges, and hikes, not to mention long sleep periods and a few naps, to begin to feel replenished. By that time I was wearing a contented smile and as little else as I could get away with on that hot summer's evening. As I got up to take my tray inside the lodge, a pendant worn around a woman's neck grabbed my attention. I continued on my bussing mission, but came back out and, without conscious intent, walked over to the wearer of the pendant and said, "Hello. I couldn't help noticing the unusual design on your pendant. Did you design it?" She answered with an explanation that I have now forgotten, but it served the purpose of allowing us to meet. She identified herself as a practicing chiropractor living in the Laguna Beach area. She went on to say that lately she had been doing something other than chiropractic that she could not explain, except that it was dramatically enhancing the results with her clients. It was totally intuitive and never the same twice. She was in a little bit of an identity crisis as to how to advertise herself now, but knew the changes were positive. Less than 2 minutes into the conversation, I became so distracted by visionary experiences that I was having. Almost apologetically, I said, "Excuse me, but something is happening that requires me to go into a trance. I'm a clairvoyant, you see, and I don't usually do this with people I've just met, but for some reason this seems important. Is that okay with you?" Her curious eyes brightened, and she quickly gave me the okay to proceed. I closed my eyes, and what I saw took me completely by surprise. In a bubble, just to the upper right of her aura, was a miniature scene of the two of us, with several Pleiadian emissaries of light aboard a spaceship, learning about and observing a dolphin star linking session. I opened my eyes and said something to the effect of, "Does this new work you're doing involve placing fingertips on various spots on the body that need to be energized by connecting them to one another? And when you do it, does the electrical circuitry between those points reconnect and activate? And do people experience immediate pain or pressure release?" Looking quite surprised, she said, "Why, yes, but I've never been able to explain it so well. How did you know?" I replied, "Because we learned it on the same Pleiadian lightship. I've been doing this type of hands-on work since the early 1980s, but I didn't know until just now that the Pleiadians had taught it to me." There was a pause, while my Pleiadian guide, Pa-La, popped in and said to tell her that they have been working with her for the last 6 months during her dream time. When I relayed that message to her, she simply replied, "That's about how long it's been since I started doing this new work. For some reason, I can't say I'm surprised." From that point, I shared with her some of my own conscious experiences with the Pleiadian emissaries of light. Pleiadian light work, which I later learned to call my Pleiadian healing techniques, was originally intended to replace the type of chiropractic work that deals only with the symptoms instead of clearing the source of structural pain. She agreed that she had felt a need for a deeper way of working prior to beginning to use the new approach, and she felt there was still more to come. I continued to tell her about my early experiences with dolphin star linking, and she shared her experiences as well. Then, Pa-La initiated a new twist in our conversation. Pa-La asked me to get some paper and a pen, which I did. For the next hour and a half, he told me about Ka channels, which are described in more detail in section 2 of this book. He showed me the general pathways of these channels, which are a whole new, old meridian type system. He informed me about something called the Ka template that serves to regulate the flow of Ka energy in the body. The Ka energy was described as the basic cosmic light and life force that, when flowing properly in our physical and etheric bodies, replenishes the other meridian systems, such as those used in acupuncture and shiatsu, and keeps them opened and flowing. This energy source essentially consists of a stepped-down light frequency from our own higher selves in their multidimensional holographic alignment. When we are reconnected to our higher selves and have our Ka channels open and receiving the higher dimensional Ka energy, the opportunity for uniting our spirits with our physical bodies is greatly increased. What this basically provides for those of us who are spiritual seekers of truth is assistance with the full process of descension of spirit into matter for the purpose of transfiguration and enlightenment. When spirit fully descends into matter, we become the bodies of the Christos here on earth. This could be called the second coming of Christ en masse. The final Ka activation is that of ascension. So much for some light after-dinner chit-chat. My new friend and I were both very delighted with the information we had received, as well as the energy boost that came with it. I was particularly energized by the past life visions and feelings that spontaneously came into my awareness. There were scenes in Lemuria, Atlantis, and ancient Egypt, in which I was among the healers who were using the same healing processes I was now being reminded of again. I re-experienced activities in temples of ancient cultures that were much more spiritually attuned in general than our world is today. It was as if I was there again, and yet the knowing that these advanced civilizations had all ultimately fallen was fresh in my memories too. The Pleiadians, my shortened name for the Pleiadian emissaries of light, say that as Earth cycles around Alcyone, as Alcyone and the Pleiadian system orbits around the galactic center, and as our galaxy does its ongoing spiral dance through time and space, there are points in the sacred spiral where we enter into grace periods. During those times, there is a great opportunity for individual and planetary spiritual awakening and evolution. Now is one of those times, a time to remember and go beyond where we have gone before. We have a window of opportunity during which we can learn from our past mistakes, forgive, and take responsibility for all we have created and experienced, and will create and experience. By doing so, we will open the door to the unfolding of this ancient future. At the Brighton Bush retreat, my new acquaintance and I were deeply inspired by the sharing and remembering. After exchanging phone numbers and addresses and making a copy of the notes for her, my new old friend and I parted for the evening, agreeing to stay in touch. Later that same evening in my cabin, I received another transmission, this time from Ascended Master Yeshua, whom I will refer to as Christ or the Christ in future references. This transmission was about the 7 rays and the role of divine couples who are keepers and dispensers of ray energies for other couples on Earth. This transmission was explained that the transformation of male and female relationships into what they are intended to be is essential now and part of the overall Christ Pleiadian plan. More details about the new male-female paradigm are included in Chapter 10, entitled Love Configuration Chamber. The information brought up a little sadness for me, since I was not in a relationship at the time and dearly wanted to be. But it also planted the seed of hope that a relationship would soon be forthcoming. I had waited a long time for my spiritual partner and helpmate. Still, I fell asleep that night, mostly contented and grateful. 2 weeks or so after my return home, 2 important events happened back to back. First, I was given a 24-hour enlightenment period, as Ra called it when he instructed me to go to Sand Flat on Mount Shasta at a certain time the following afternoon and sit under the so-called Christ tree. This tree had been shown to me by the Christ in his etheric form a few years previously as a place to meet with him. For a few months, every time I went there, the Christ would welcome me, He would give me spiritual teachings and discourses to help me have compassion for myself, or to direct my life and spiritual growth in some way. After an especially joyful sharing with him one day, he informed me that he would not be meeting me there anymore, except on very rare occasions. He said he wanted me to be an equal friend and not rely on him too much. The spot under the tree would become a place to sit in peace and connect with my own Christed presence in a stronger way than I was usually able to do at the time in other places. So when Ra asked me to go there, I gladly went. I barely had time to get comfortable under the tree when a group of Pleiadians, as well as the Christ and Kuan Yin and many angels and other light beings all surrounded me. I was taken into an expanded state that they called an enlightenment reference point. The first words I heard were from Ra. He said, "You will be teaching a 20-day program called the Pleiadian Lightwork Intensive. It will be held in late November and December of this year and will be in 3 parts. Section 1 will be called Neuromuscular Cortical Repatterning, which I now call Dolphin Brain Repatterning. And this will free the spine and skeletal system of the most basic holding patterns in order to allow and encourage the cerebrospinal fluid to flow more deeply and fully. This will help open the neural transmitters in the body to new light frequencies." He continued, "These new frequencies will be introduced in Section 2, which will be entitled Ka Channels and Ka Template Activation. Within this section of the intensive, you will also be teaching higher self-connection, higher ethics, and the basic spiritual responsibility necessary to keep the Ka energies flowing once opened. Section 3 will be called Electrical Light Body Reactivation and Realignment, which I now call Dolphin Star Linking." Ra continued, "In order for this work to have a fuller and more lasting effect, the Ka channels must be opened prior to electrical work. The Ka energy is needed to keep the electrical pathways clear once the initial work is done." I was more than a little surprised. To begin with, I tended toward the conservative approach in my networking and advertising. To blatantly call this new program the Pleiadian Lightwork Intensive was a big stretch for me. But I did not question it because, in the state I was in, I felt the trueness of it. The next stretch came when Ra went on to outline a couple of things I did not even know about yet. With a slight touch of amusement, he said I would be well prepared by the time I needed to be. He outlined many more details and plans at that time, which I must say I had no trouble at all remembering when I got home. This was not my usual experience. Generally, my memory is not so much to brag about. The second important event that occurred after I returned from Brightonbush was the return of my ex-fiancée into my life. This was an even bigger surprise, since I had considered myself complete with that relationship. And yet there he was, ancient soul partner and beloved, complete with all the deep feelings. I went back to my teaching and healing practices. At first, not much seemed to be happening toward the Pleiadian Lightwork Intensive. The only continuum was that the Pleiadians and the Christ together were doing regular healing sessions for me to open my Ka channels as much as they could be opened without the physical hands-on work. They told me the results would be deeper for me when I had students trained who could do the healing work hands-on for me. At times, the Pleiadian emissaries of light would clairvoyantly show me where the channel they were working on was located in my body and have me erase pain, which, for some reason, they were unable to do. At other times, I would just relax and feel subtle energies and eventually fall asleep. The most noticeable change from their work on me was a balancing of my energy level throughout the day. The highs and lows I was used to diminished to almost non-existence. In general, a feeling of lightness and resilience formed and remained. Later, clients receiving the Pleiadian lightwork reported almost identical results. The Pleiadians seemed to find my tendency to measure the value of my work by its immediate results to be quite humorous. They told me the real purpose of the work was only vaguely connected with what I was experiencing directly. It would be 2 years after the Ka channels were opened before most recipients would be available for true Ka function to begin. The connection throughout the higher dimensions was with our own higher selves. This connection would open multidimensional communications with our higher selves and with other light beings, allowing us to receive direct communications from the star systems involved with our solar system and galaxy. Even after the 2 years, the Ka's range of functions would continue to expand in ways we could not yet imagine. Still happy with the changes the work was making in my own life and the promises of greater things to come, I began my first series of Ka sessions with a close friend who was also a student and healing client. Each time the sessions began, I had no idea what I would be doing. Inevitably, I would be shown a channel, one activation point at a time, which I would note on paper afterward. Another friend and student came for a 3-day private healing intensive and became the source of 3 more sets of channels being revealed. Between these sessions and the private meetings with the Pleiadians, all the channels were eventually shown to me. The pieces of the puzzle fit together. There are 32 meridians and 16 pairs altogether. All had several activation points. Sometimes there was a form of what I would call psychic surgery needed to heal the channels. Other times the techniques for opening Ka channels were much simpler, though very specific, and these were only the most obvious aspects of the Pleiadian lightwork. In a reading with one client, I was shown the role of the neural pathways on the brain to spiritual growth and honesty. In a nutshell, if our response in every life situation is not 100% spontaneously truthful, the spirit cannot live in the body. The frequency of even the most minor deception, even if by omission, is below the minimum frequency level necessary for the higher self to fully embody the person. The details of this are explained in Clearing Erroneous Neural Pathways in Chapter 12. For now, just ponder the implications in your own life of being spontaneously 100% truthful. How would that change everything in your life? November and the first Pleiadian Lightwork Intensive came. Now I can truthfully say it far surpassed my own expectations of what it would be. Every day, the light ship would superimpose itself around my house, and all present would be accelerated at once. After only 3 days, my observation was, now I know why they call it an intensive. It certainly was that. Without exception, everyone in the group went through the emotional wringer at least once. Some students did so repeatedly. That partially had to do with tendencies toward resistant and reactionary response patterns. However, for the most part, the Pleiadian Lightwork Intensive simply involved deep healing and opening that happened consistently enough to help people go beyond their prior limits. In other words, everyone, including me, grew incredibly during those 20 days. My biggest challenge was having my partner in the group because our relationship was rocky at best much of the time. There I was, leading this group and teaching about spontaneous truthfulness as a spiritual requirement for Pleiadian Lightwork Intensive level work, and some days I could not hold back my tears. Having my mate in a group I was leading would have had its challenges in the best of situations. Added to that was the painful state of our relationship. It was hard to even look at him without crying at times. So what did I do? I was totally honest with the group, without blaming, just like I was teaching them to be in their lives. At morning check-in, I would simply state how I was feeling. Sometimes I was balanced, open, and loving. Sometimes I was tearful, and at other times I was frustrated. The one consistent thing was I always shared with the group honestly. Each day I recommitted to giving the group my best, regardless of my emotional state. And I did. I dare say that group probably learned more about being painfully honest and exposed by witnessing my own day-to-day process of just being there than they did in any other way. I went through self-judgment about not being more collected on a consistent basis, about not being in a more fulfilling relationship, and about choosing to allow him to be in the group. Every day I dealt with my own expectations and judgments of myself, and each day I transformed them into self-acceptance and compassion for myself. In the end, without exception, the group members thanked me for having the courage to walk my talk while being so vulnerable with them. It had been a great part of the learning experience for all concerned. Their loving acceptance and appreciation made it a lot easier to accept myself. Still, at the end, I promised myself I would never repeat that part of the experience. True compassion for myself would mean not putting myself in that position ever again. Now, don't misunderstand. I was not a basket case, all day, every day. I had clear and happy days as well. It was just that, when the pain was there, I allowed it to be. Verbally, I let the intensive members know, without too many personal details about my partner, how I was feeling. Yet when the teaching began, I put my best foot forward and did my job. There is a great sense of personal strength and self-respect that comes when we mature enough to know that we can always be there for others no matter what is going on in our lives. This was simply the biggest test of that capability I had ever undergone. My neural pathways must have been buzzing after that one. Well, his and my relationship ended shortly after the Pleiadian Lightwork Intensive was over, and a personal recovery and healing ensued. As always, my own process was mixed with my ongoing private healing practice and teaching. It It helped that I was finally getting some of my own Ka channels opened in the hands-on sessions with a Pleiadian Lightwork Intensive graduate student, which was a great reward. The deeper the work went into my own body, the better I felt about sharing it with others. One wintry night I came into the living room to read my mail and relax. In the mail was a newsletter from a friend I had not seen in over a year and a half. She was sharing in the newsletter about goals for a new healing center she was in the process of pulling together. As I read, I felt more and more strongly the role of Pleiadian Lightwork Intensive in a shared future with this friend. Yet, in my state of tiredness that night, I went into self-doubt and began to think I was just projecting onto her because it was my latest thing to be excited about. But the feelings were strong. Finally, I noticed a copy of the book called The Keys of Enoch my roommate had left on the table. I had never been drawn to reading that book before, but suddenly I felt compelled to pick it up. As I did, the familiar voice of Ra said, "Open the book randomly and see what's there. It will either confirm your doubts or affirm your feelings about the future of Pleiadian Lightwork." Randomly, I opened the book to section 315, which proceeded to define Ka as the divine double, calling it by name. My mouth dropped open as I read the next 3 sections. The passages described the function of this divine double in our own enchristment, which is to make way for our own ascended master selves to enter the physical form. Axiotonal lines, which I believe are the same as Ka channels, were described as corresponding to the acupuncture meridians. These lines or meridians were described as the keys not only to physical health, but, when properly aligned with our higher dimensional selves, as capable of regeneration of organs and the opening to the descension of our Christed selves into our bodies. Basically, the book outlined what needs to be accomplished in order for the mass enlightenment to take place on a person-by-person level, though it did not explain how that was to be done. The Pleiadian Lightwork is precisely about how to accomplish this worthy and timely task. That was as clear a confirmation as I could ever imagined receiving, and my enthusiasm soared. The next thing that came strongly in the foreground of my life, after weeks of hints, was the need to begin writing. Within 24 hours of that The Keys of Enoch experience, 2 friends approached me with the question, "When are you going to start your book?" I had not told either of these people that I had had any ideas about writing, and yet there they were, telling me I had. My friend Shahan said that for weeks, every time she went to her medicine wheel at the lake to meditate, a book would float in the air above the circle. She said it was written by me and edited by her, and when would we start? Then my friend Beth, a graduate of the first intensive, called. She had just done her first introductory evening to Pleiadian Lightwork, teaching it in Georgia, and had been successful in having a great turnout. The majority of the attendees were interested either in classes or private work. But what had surprised her the most was that Ra had come into the presentation with a message for the group announcing, "Keep an eye out for Amora Kuan Yin's book, which will be out in the next 1.5 to 2 years. The word Ka is scarcely known by a handful of people now, but in the upcoming times it will be an important buzzword for many. End quote. After relaying Ra's message, Beth said to me, "I didn't know you were writing a book. When will it be out?" My honest reply was, "I didn't really know for sure either, but I guess I'd better get busy." At that point in the conversation, I was given an image of the front cover of a book on which were written the words, "It's time now." At the time, I assumed the words on the cover were the title. Later, I realized they were a message just for me. Years before, when the Pleiadians had disappeared, Ra had said, "When the time is right, we'll be together again." Months before, I had asked the Pleiadians why the healing work was being introduced at this particular time and not sooner. Ra had replied, "It's time now," simply and clearly.